Good day to you and happy holidays from Miami Community News. Willard Shepard, Willard Shepard Law and Media on In the Know. And honored today to have one of our military veterans with us and one of my friends, Mr. Major Brian Lynch, who has done an incredible job as the founder of VETSOME, working not only here in South Florida, but across the country to making sure that veterans and veteran businesses receive the support that they need, and also the community knows all about it. But before we get into any of that, Major, I need you to tell me, because you're one of the few people in the United States Marine Corps that actually is a skier. So I want you to take our audience through this process. You know, my son's a Marine,
right?
So Semper Fi to both of you.
Semper Fi.
And you generally think of our Marine Corps of storming the beaches and not on the ski slopes.
Yeah.
So, Major, tell us how all of that happened.
Well, it's Brian. It's not Major. It hasn't been Major for 20-something years now. But yeah, I grew up in Boston and went to college in Vermont at Norwich, and there's a ski hill literally across the street. And I was a Marine reservist during college and was with the 25th Marines up in New Hampshire, and they do a lot of mountain warfare training up there. The Marine Corps also has a mountain warfare trainer center in Bridgeport, California, which is at altitude near, probably just west of Lake Tahoe, right near where the Donner Pass was. And I had the privilege of during my 15 years, I went up there probably 6 times, 4 winter sessions and 2 summer sessions. And if you don't know how to ski, you learn while you're up there. So it's, but yet haven't skied in years. Been in Miami now 25 years, and it's been about that long since I've gotten on the set of stilts, but I miss it. I miss it.
Well, I know on the Army side, you correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's our 10th Mountain Division on the Army side that has that mission. But just describe overall what that mission is and how you would actually deploy with that and actually execute with that skill set, because we certainly, and especially over the years where we have been deployed in places, and you always hear me say, I never been to Iraq, I just been over it, which is a good thing. We don't think about being prepared for this type of environment, but we need to be. Yeah,
mountain warfare is a different animal, and it's been several years for me, and I am no expert in that region, I will tell you, but what it entails is operating in a very heavily mountainous environment, very cold environment as well. When you see a lot of the pictures of the 10th Mountain Division and the Marines that do work in that, they work a lot with the Norwegian Marines too. They go back and forth. The reserve unit I was with every year would either go to Norway or have the Norwegians come here, and they alternated back and forth. The Norwegians, I can tell you, are light years ahead of us as far as skiing goes. They're 3 months old and they're on a set of skis going down a hill. Marines initially struggle with that, I think. I think anybody does when they first do it, because you have to carry a rifle and a pack and everything else that an infantry Marine carries. Different animal, but the capability of the Army and the Marine Corps units that are in that environment are they're up there. They're top notch, and they train extensively with our NATO allies to get there. To this day, they're there in exchange tours all the time.
Well, my son was in 4th Anglico here, and so I've taken him skiing, and he's taken a liking to it. So when I speak to him this evening, I'm going to let him know that may be the other MOS career field for you civilian types.
It is.
We may educate him about and see if he wants to go back over there so he can check all of that out. But no, I thought that was fascinating, and I want the public to know about your background and your history. And you have one of the most unusual backgrounds when it comes to our military services, because there are very, very, very few operators that have your background and skill set there. So.
Well, skill set, yes, but not. I got out prior to 9/11. I got out in 2000. And I don't try to compare anything that I did to what our warriors have been exposed to and what they've the environments they've operated in the last 24 years now. So prior to that, I was very lucky to have a lot of opportunities in infantry and recon and light armor and some skiing in there as well, but not nothing I would even remotely compare it to what's been going on in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Well, to today and where we are with the beautiful background, no skiing here for us in South Florida, even though it is the holidays. Tell us all about VETSOME and what you're up to. And obviously, I always tell people here in South Florida that when it comes to any place across the country, we are one of the places that combines active duty military with our Coast Guard bases, the Reserve, Guard services. We have our United States Southern Command here,
Right.
active duty. And across that platform, and then so many veterans that are retiring here and have retired here. So we have a significant military and veteran population here in Florida.
Right.
And just tell us about your work with them, not only here in South Florida, but beyond.
Right. It's as I stated, I got out in 2000. I've been involved in military philanthropy for about 24 years, right when I got out. The veteran population here in Dade County, probably 50,000-ish, a little bit larger in Broward County, 60K. Florida itself, I think, is the third largest veteran population behind California and Texas. And as you stated, from an active duty perspective, we've got Southcom, we've got Coast Guard here out on South Beach, multiple reserve units for all the services as well, and a great community tie to a lot of that. We do a lot of different events. Prior to me starting VETSOME, we, as you know, we worked with the Chief Press Foundation and the Miami-Dade County Association of Chiefs of Police, about to celebrate their 10th anniversary next year, where the police chiefs all get together and serve lunch to the veterans and the active duty folks. We've always had a very large population of veterans over the last 2 years. A lot of the Southcom individuals come over. We had some sergeants major and a couple of general officers attend last year and this year. And it's a great thing. It's a great thing to see that community tie. VETSOME itself started almost a year ago. The motto for VETSOME is...
Hold on one second. I want you, because we have some pictures going up here.
Yeah, that's
and that's over at Marlins Park.
Lone Depot Park, yeah. Lone Depot Park, where we're sponsored by Lone Depot and the Marlins. You yourself covered it in another life a couple years back.
And today I just came to eat, or this year.
And it was inside this year. These are photos, I believe, from last year's event. And it's a wonderful day. We very strong support from the VA. That's Georgie Krell right there, the Gold Mother Extraordinaire. The VA hospital in the Health District here is named after her son, Bruce Carter, Medal of Honor recipient. It's a wonderful setup to have the veterans come over. I was explaining to your staff earlier, some of those veterans that live in that hospital, they're residents up on the upper floors, and they don't get out very often. And a handful of them, the one time a year that they come out, is our lunch that we have with Chief President's Foundation. Wonderful support from Royal Caribbean groups. Starbucks shows up every year. Lone Depot Park, the Marlins. It's a fantastic event. Compilation of 3 or 4 other nonprofits that come together to do it. But it's just a fantastic statement of showing love for the community and our veterans.
I met some veterans there who actually got on a bus. You sent a bus to the VA to bring them over.
4. We send 4 buses. Luckily the VA is across the street on the other side of the 836. So we shuttle buses every couple hours to keep them in there. Some of them can't stay for the full 3 hours or what have you. They come in, have lunch, and head out. Great setup.
Let's give our friend Chief Prest a shout out, more of a shout out here about his organization and his ability to work along with you to make this happen.
Yeah, Chuck Press, former police chief, not only from Miami Beach, but also Key Biscayne, runs the Chief Press Foundation, where he's been working with a lot of kids in some troubled parts of the city. He's done some amazing things. He flew a group of young men out to California a couple years ago. They got to meet President Obama at the time, and Chuck has been a mentor for them, has been a mentor, running his own Christmas drive, toy drive every year. He's in the midst of that right now. And he originally, I believe it was right on Flagler, he had this lunch set up for the first time on the 2nd story of a rundown building. And I bumped into him not long after that, and he said, hey, we do this really cool thing with the police chiefs, but we don't really have a venue. And I knew some folks at the Marlins, and I called them up, and they were all for it. We got it set up probably within a few days. Royal Caribbean stepped in with sponsorship. Starbucks, the local regional manager, was a former Marine. His brother had served with my son, so that made it easier as well. And the Marlins stepped in addition with Lone Depot Park, took care of the rest of the funding. So it's free for everybody that shows up. Every veteran and active duty member eats for free. It's a gourmet lunch, gourmet dessert, Billy comes out, raffle off some iPads. It's a great time. Great time.
Awesome. And as a veteran, thank you very much, because I enjoyed the meal and I always enjoy the company as well. To that point, before we get into a little bit more about your organization and what you're doing, I'm always obviously concerned, but I'm also mystified sometimes with our veterans in our community that have trouble moving forward after their military service, and especially in the area of homelessness. And our Miami Trust and the Homeless Trust is really, Ron Book and his team have really tried to do everything they can to eliminate homelessness amongst our veterans. And I'm always, Brian, mystified about this, and I speak about this with my family. The types of skill sets, and we talked about, your background and training, to be able to go through the kinds of things that you have to be a deployable service member. I've never grasped what it is that in civilian life that people don't fall back on that, because if you were able to make it through that process, how do we end up here in the first place? And I will say I certainly do obviously understand that there's some combat experiences that some people may have that are so traumatic that they're overriding what the training experiences have been. So I'm not diminishing that in any way. And I want to be 100% clear about that. But I just think the skill sets that we have to be able to accomplish a mission in the first place would allow us to be able to apply that to civilian life.
I don't think you're wrong, but I also think you hit the nail on the head. It's what they're exposed to, right? And trauma for you might not be trauma for me, and vice versa. Everybody has a certain level, and there are thousands of podcasts where people talk about this and different levels of exposure and all of that. The training that men and women receive in the military is exceptional. What they're exposed to is oftentimes metered personally, right? Where they may or may not have had the capability to deal with it. I mean, back during Desert Storm, we had conscientious objectors. You remember that? And it was like this big thing. How could this person ever make it into the military and then all of a sudden be a conscientious objector doing what they signed up and swore that they would do? The homelessness thing is tricky because in addition to the exposure of what it is that they did in the military, there's mental illness, there's substance abuse, there's 1,000 other things that go into that. Here in Miami, as you mentioned, the Homeless Trust is exceptional. I worked with them extensively when I was with the United Way. We had veterans almost weekly that had challenges with not having the right place to stay. The trust was always there for us, always providing a hotel room. Veterans are preferred category in that they fall into a preferred population and they get priority treatment for that. But when you put someone into a facility or a hotel and then they leave the next morning, oftentimes they disappear into the crowd. And that's the hardest part, because we do try to make sure that anytime somebody needs help, it might not be my organization, it might be an organization that I know and worked with. That's what's great about the Homeless Trust. They work with all of us, multiple organizations trying to help veterans out, getting them to a safe space. But oftentimes we are dealing with those intangibles of be it substance abuse or mental illness in particular that are just tough. And a lot of these veterans, they have family. They have people that are willing and trying to help. They're just dealing with severe life issues that they haven't been able to control. But it's nothing that has ever stopped us. It hasn't stopped the Homeless Trust. They get a tremendous amount of funding every year. I believe it's from HUD to keep the actions going. And it's a battle, Willard. It's a battle, and it's something that we won't give up on. The veterans that come to us, we will always find something for them. Could be short term, could be long term, but it's something that you just have to be prepared to continue to, as we say in the motto for VETSOME, you stay in the fight.
Okay, so tell us all about VETSOME and the businesses and the support that you're providing.
Yeah, it's a fantastic opportunity. The backstory is it started a couple of years ago. I was working on a writing project with a partner of mine, and we did some interviews just like you and I are doing now. We called it Ammo Can Talks. That was the original title for it, and we were speaking to individuals that were involved in the evacuation of Afghanistan in 21. Call it botched, call it successful, depending upon your perspective. They did rescue a couple 100,000 people. Did they get the right people out? That's debatable. They certainly didn't get everybody out. There were certain groups around the country. You've heard of Pineapple Express and Digital Dunkirk and all that. The one that we focused on was Team America Relief. It's a group out of Denver. A bunch of school teachers, a couple of former military guys, a couple of CIA guys that over the phone and on the laptop in a matter of months saved about 2,000 people. Literally were able to get them to evacuate from Kabul through multiple safe houses and multiple routes. Some flew to Portugal, some flew to Qatar, as you know. An incredible story. Did those did those interviews and then realized, well, we may have something here, and it's not going to. I think we were. I think we did about 35 or 40 different interviews. So I decided to take that and move forward. COVID was right around the corner, or COVID was still raging at the time, and I realized, there's more stories to this. There's a lot more to it. Why don't we start to talk to more veterans that are doing other things like starting businesses? Maybe they wrote a book when they got out. Maybe they started a nonprofit, what have you. So put the word out. Like I said, the motto is stay in the fight. That's a term that a lot of veterans use, and they want to keep involved, stay involved with the military community. We've got about 30 episodes that are up now on the website, and we have talked to veterans that have started nonprofits and written books and started businesses, and we have a couple of local heroes, our ladies from the iPads for Soldiers and the Footsteps to Freedom thing as well. So the intent is to tell these success stories, because we know America loves her veterans, and we feel our responsibility to make sure that we remind the American public of what these veterans are doing after service.
We've got some pictures up there that Ray Shell has put up there. Kind of walk us through what we're seeing.
This is the Footsteps to Freedom project that was spawned off of what Winnie Pritchett and Amy Zambrano did with the iPads for Soldiers. It was an initiative that started, I believe, about 10, 15 years ago. Winnie Pritchett's son was an OH-58 pilot in the military. Winnie and her husband were trying to maintain contact with him. It wasn't easy at the time. So they sent him an iPad so he could communicate. I don't know what Wi-Fi assets he was using in the middle of the desert, but they loved the iPads. They thought it was great. So Winnie and Amy started iPads for Soldiers. They raised a ton of money, and we're able to get iPads sent over regularly, not just to Iraq and Afghanistan, but to Marines and sailors deployed on warships. They actually sent my son a box of iPads several years ago in his last year on active duty, and it's been a huge success. So one of the paybacks for it was the ladies asked the recipients of the iPads, hey, if you wouldn't mind, would you send us a boot? A combat boot, an unserviceable boot that was trashed or about to be thrown out or what have you, and it worked. And they received hundreds of boots, some of them torn up, some of them bloodied and messy. And then they said, we really ought to do something with these. And they spoke to a few donors and tried to get a few things going, because during all of this time of sending iPads over, Winnie and Amy were making trips at least twice a year to Walter Reed in D.C. And they were visiting with wounded troops, and in addition to the ones that they mailed, they brought these iPads to the soldiers, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen that were there, and just to give them something that they could use. So with the boots, they were able to communicate with a couple of sponsors, the main one being Diageo, and they said, hey, this is what we got. Would you like to help us put together something for Walter Reed? So Diageo came up with the idea, and a bunch of local artists and international artists designed the beauty of the boots. All of the combat boots are very different. They've been painted by some very famous artists, and you can see they sit in those beautiful display cases in Walter Reed, which, as you know, is not the prettiest of government buildings that we have in the inventory. So it's sitting on that wall right there with all those beautiful boots encased. It lights up at night, and to the side of it is a wonderful letter that one of the iPad recipients wrote to Amy and Winnie. It's a deeply, deeply personal letter, very heavy content about what it meant to donate that boot to the program.
Tell me about some of the other businesses, some of the success stories that you have found along your way.
Yeah, it's been fun, because in my position as the founder for the for the nonprofit, I get to call up a veteran and say, hey, would you like to talk about what you do? And it runs the full gamut. We've had Jake Schick on. Jake Schick was in American Sniper with Clint Eastwood and Bradley Cooper, and he was also in the Lady Gaga movie, A Star Is Born. He was the not so pleasant boss of the catering company. Jake is a former Marine, single amputee, was severely wounded, and his own nonprofit, 2-2 Kill, and the One Tribe Foundation out there in Texas. We've had Dante Scarnecchia on, who we were talking about earlier, football coach, line football coach for the New England Patriots, who was a former Marine back in the 70s. He was a reservist. I think he was a tanker, actually, and we had him on and talked to him about his experience being an enlisted Marine and then using some of that experience to deal with NFL players, which he said he wanted to go all Sergeant Scarnecchia on them sometimes, but he had to kind of hold off. And then we've had some interesting ones as well that are not totally veterans, but or not veterans, but organizations that help veterans. David Keener comes to mind, One Family Brewing in Pennsylvania. David was supposed to be on the plane that crashed into the Pentagon. For some reason, had canceled his flight the day before the flight, and runs a brewery out in the western part of the state of Virginia, I believe, and does a lot of things for veterans, a lot of fundraising and all that. There's a horse ranch that we had on up in Long Island that does equine therapy for Marines. We get for veterans across the board. We have another young Marine that started a comic book business and is drawing comic books and doing all kinds of things. So it's been interesting. We've had them all in there. A couple of Navy SEALs on there. We had a few of the other Army guys that came on. That one Navy officer and one Marine officer. Dan Nosson comes to mind. Dan Nosson with his partner Nate, classmates at the Naval Academy. They were on 60 Minutes. Nate is a former Marine officer. Dan was the SEAL, double amputee, lost both legs below the knee. Started the Mountain Seed Foundation, where they bring Gold Star families from Ukraine to Austria to mountain climb. And Nate's all in one piece, he's good, but Dan's missing both legs, and he climbs those mountains along with the kids and the families that they bring. So it's fascinating across the board. We've had all services on there, I think, with the exception of Coast Guard and Space Force. We need to find, I don't know if Space Force is old enough to have any veterans yet, but we'll see. We'll get them on there.
I had the opportunity and an honor to be able to go to police dive school with the Miami-Dade County Police Department, and now retired Mike Gast. Yeah. Kept me from drowning. And my camera person at the time, Mike Zimmer, who now does his show down in the Florida Keys. Yeah. When we finished that process, due to that, I was able to go out on a dive later with the Warriors Project, where they have the amputees that are diving. We were down in Bonaire, and they talk about the relief that they feel because in the water, because of the buoyancy, that they have their mobility, that it's completely different. And it was a fantastic experience. The types of things that you're talking about that allow our veterans who have made it through these combat situations but have had life-altering and changing experiences to motivate them and inspire them going forward.
Right, and to get them out of the house and be a part of a community. Yeah, when you were talking about that, I thought about a gentleman that we were working with who was a 93-year-old vet during Fleet Week in Fort Lauderdale. I think it was back in 2017. He was honored at Fleet Week. The French consulate gives their French Medal of Freedom, or whatever version of that is, to a bunch of those that are still alive that landed at Normandy. And this gentleman was given the medal, and was on the news a couple of times. We knew he was in Miami. We just didn't know where he lived. Very close to the design district. So we called him up and chatted him up and made sure he was okay, and he invited us over, and he needed some work done on his house. So there was some couple of local groups supported by Home Depot locally that did some work on his house. But we would go over and have lunch with him, and one day he just started crying. and we thought we did something wrong. And I said to my partner Rashim, I said, "Dude, we should probably leave. I don't know what we did here, but let's." Right. And he stopped us and he said, "You guys don't understand." He said, "I don't ever talk to anybody about anything, and I'm sitting here talking with you. Thank you for coming." 93 years old, Willard. 93 years old. He held that in and had held that in. We lost him a couple years later, since 1945. And that's the problem with a lot of the veterans, is that they, and I won't say they don't seek it. It's just that some of them are so in it that they can't get out of it. It's just that there oftentimes isn't enough of an effort to grab those individuals, not literally but figuratively, and say, hey, we care. We got a community here. We might be doing a lunch at Marlins Park, or we might be doing a walk down on the beach, and we might be doing a Christmas party or an Army-Navy game watch party like we had scheduled.
Up, and it's something every American
every American
actually not only stop on Saturday,
exactly,
to see the cadets and the midshipmen come out.
That's right.
I've had the honor of being able to go there. Actually, NBC has a program for veterans that where we learn leadership and then pass on the leadership skills that we have. Right. And the culmination of that is the Army-Navy game. So my son came up and we went, as everybody should see it.
It's a great event.
1,000%. Let me ask you, in the few minutes we have left, tell me what your dream is, what your ultimate goal and accomplishment is, and you would, I say, mission objective, and how members of the community can support that. Yeah,
it's a great question. I appreciate you asking. VETSOME is something that we would like to scale because, as I stated earlier, America loves her veterans, and we feel it's our responsibility to make sure that she doesn't forget that. We have a massive network of veterans, active duty, and anything and everything in between. We do have a lot of civilian organizations that may not be full of veterans or have veterans in them, but they love to support their military and their veterans. The dream is to scale VETSOME to be its own, not its own platform, but to be on a platform regularly, where we are going around the country in the VETSOME RV, as we've fantasized about, and going around and having multiple miniature Veterans Days every day in America, every different city. And we've had success with this. We were supposed to be doing a watch party this weekend for the Army-Navy game. We had already had an agreement in place with the Bucks in Tampa. And then, of course, the hurricane a little over a month ago in Asheville decimated northern Florida, parts of Tennessee, and a good chunk of North Carolina. And they asked us, they said, hey, hate to do this to you, but do you mind if we divert the funds? It was an easy decision for us. We're not going to enjoy a football game when we know that these people are still hurting, but they immediately signed us up for next year. So we'll do this watch party next year. It's going to be a great event. Sit on the grass, watch the game from inside. There were 35 military nonprofits in attendance, the little vendor village. We had Franny Drummond, who is the artist. You'll notice this weekend those really cool helmets. I think the Jolly Roger on the Navy helmets. Franny Drummond's dad was a former Marine. He's the artist that hand paints all of those helmets, and he made a really cool trophy for us. So at the watch party, we were going to present the trophy, and we'll present the trophy to the winning service. We'd like to do it year-round, and you and I have discussed there is a calendar of military events and military and veteran events that you could do year-round. Service birthdays, welcome home ceremonies, which people love to see, send-off ceremonies, which aren't always pleasant, but they're important, ship commissionings, new bases being opened and renamed and that type of thing, but other things too, like what is a mess night? What is a wet down? What is a, why do Marines start celebrating their birthday on July 5th every year? That type of thing. And we feel as if that calendar, if it's put together properly, we put the right team together, which you and I have discussed, we think we can take this and make it a regular thing so that people are hearing about their veterans and their active duty on a weekly basis.
Last thing for you. I always say we live in a country now where less than 1% of the population protects 325 million people. And I just think that so many in the general public, since they don't have someone involved, different than before you and I were born in World War II. Right. Either every family member or people on the block knew someone. Right. And we don't live in that environment now. And what do we need to do to continually educate the general civilian population about all of this?
Yeah, another great question. Willard, since I enlisted in 1985, I had always heard about the Great Divide, the military-civilian divide, and I understand that, but I don't totally buy it. The military is not for everybody. You know that. Mm-hmm. I know that. It doesn't mean that they're not supported, because to your point, I can't tell you how many times people will approach me and say, I'd really like to do something for veterans or the active duty troops, but I don't know anybody. I welcome that conversation. We welcome that conversation. We're happy to hear it. I think that's part of what VETSOME does, is VETSOME answers those questions for people that are curious to know, what are the veterans doing? It's good. The issue that I always like to confront immediately is that not all veterans are broken. We've got plenty of veterans out there that are doing extremely well. VETSOME is a perfect example. You'll go on there and you'll see men and women that served even recently, OEF, OIF veterans from the past 20 years that are doing extremely well. They've started their own businesses. They've written books. They've started nonprofits, and they're excelling, getting advanced degrees, doing some amazing things. So I think that's really the key. And on top of all of that, it's the conversation. You have to be willing to keep the conversation alive. Again, our motto is stay in the fight. Part of staying in the fight is to stay focused on the fact that the men and women that served have complete and full utility post-service. And they're doing some amazing things. The nonprofits that we're working with, some of the other organizations and the companies that we're working with, our sponsors for like the Chiefs lunch we talked about earlier, the sponsors that we had for the Army-Navy game this weekend. Incredible organizations that love their military and their veterans, and they want to continue to help them succeed.
Always great to see you.
Great to see you, brother.
Can you shoot and ski at the same time?
I not as well as I could 25 years ago.
There you go. You might have been in the James Bond movie. That's one of my favorite scenes. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Obviously, during our time with you today, we've been running across the screen how you can get in touch with Mr. Lynch and his organization to be able to support our veterans. So please reach out. Have a fantastic holiday season, and we'll see you next time on In the Know.